So we now know through Total War Pharaoh's data files that the physical campaign map does not stretch into Mesopotamia. What this means is that while everyone is hoping for a Mesopotamia DLC, it very likely won't happen because CA has never expanded the physical map of a Total War game through a DLC before, and that's not going to happen now, especially with all the issues the business is currently going through. We also know, as you can see here, that the map does include Western Anatolia and some of the islands, including Crete, so there is a decent chance that new factions, Achaean, Total War, Troy-like factions, could be added in future DLCs, which makes complete sense, of course. CA could easily reuse a lot of what it did with Troy and repackage it to sell it to the player base in the future. Notice, though, that mainland Greece is completely missing, which, as with Mesopotamia, means there will likely not be any sort of DLC map expansion into this very relevant Bronze Age region either. Now let all of that just sink in for a moment. CA Sophia said multiple times in the past that they wanted to deliver the definitive Bronze Age experience, and yet they pretty much had no plans, or were forced, more likely by a lack of budget and resources, to never really expect to deliver on that. How can you say you're going to make the ultimate Bronze Age game knowing full well there won't be Mesopotamia or mainland Greece? I'm sure they're very passionate about Total War Pharaoh, and I'm sure they did want to at some point add these areas, but the point is they knew they never were going to be able to. Another important confirmation, which shouldn't really come as much of a surprise, is that through modders we now know that a lot, and I mean a lot, of Troy data is in Total War Pharaoh as well. So much so that at least a dozen battle maps are directly ported over and renamed, that Pharaoh is built on Warhammer 2 tech just as Troy was, which explains the many problems the game currently has, and that it's very likely Pharaoh started as a saga game, much like Troy in terms of content and scope, that then got enough budget to expand that scope and to slap on a hefty price tag and allow marketing to call it Creative Assembly's next major historical title. Thankfully, most of us can see the game for what it truly is, though, a glorified saga. And finally, the biggest indicator that future DLCs are still up in the air and heavily dependent on Pharaoh's initial success, especially given all the budget and staff cuts at CA of recent times, is the complete radio silence about their DLC roadmap. If a Greek expansion or a Mesopotamian expansion were in the works at CA, they would 100% be using that in their marketing material to increase pre-order sales, but that's not happening. They're clearly sitting on their hands waiting to see how Pharaoh performs before promising on anything that they very likely won't be able to deliver. The reality is silence in this case speaks louder than words, and everyone hoping for these campaign expansions really already have an answer. The DLC packages do mention a campaign DLC, which means something will happen because CA needs to deliver on pre-order sales that have already made that promise, but with everything we know so far, it's extremely unlikely any sort of map expansion will be made. And let's be real here, to buy into half a definitive Bronze Age game simply with the hopes that the other half gets added in eventually is just a terrible reason to do so, and is just another shady reason for CA's lack of communication here. Now, yes, potentially modders can expand the map themselves. With or without tools that CA makes available, it's possible Greece and Mesopotamia could be added in, maybe. We all know modders usually do pick up Total War and make content that CA should have made in the first place. But here's a bit of a reality check for you guys. We shouldn't have to lean on modders to deliver content that CA should be delivering in the base game, and CA have never really given modders enough of an early access to make content like this. If they did, it would stand to reason that they don't have any plans on adding these things themselves, right? Well, I know for a fact from sources in the modding community that modders have had access to the game for over 3 months now, and CA have been asking them very seriously what else they would do with Pharaoh if they had full freedom to do what they wanted. This is a huge red flag, guys. CA Sophia don't have enough resources to do the things the community wants them to do with the game, add in more factions, more cultures, depth, better improved fundamental battle mechanics, and especially expand the campaign map to make an actually definitive Bronze Age game. And what they're doing is asking modders what they would do, and if there's enough interest, make the tools available for the community to do it themselves. So the lack of DLC comms makes a little more sense sense now, right? CA is waiting to see if the game sells well, and at the same time, they're dangling a carrot in front of the Total War community to see if they'll make it all for free if they have the tools they need. Regardless of whether the game is good or not, regardless of whether early access players are really enjoying Pharaoh or not, which is great. If you're enjoying it, good for you. This is not something I support at all. Creative Assembly exploiting the passionate free work of modders to do what they can't is just a massive step too far. People have been asking for full freedom modding capabilities in Total War games for a long time now, and I can see this being justified if CA was never going to make a Total War game again, but I'd be really surprised if that's the case. So to see this be made available at a time of great uncertainty now, and for a major historical title that should have all of this content be here already in the base game, is incredibly unethical and exploitative. Now, this doesn't mean that Sophia won't add perhaps an Assyrian faction into the game like Memnon in Troy that enters the campaign map to wreak havoc in the Bronze Age collapse, much like Ursu does in this region, or that they won't add a similar thing to Western Anatolia with a Phrygian or Achaean faction in the opposite manner, as like a faction perhaps fleeing the sea peoples who have just destroyed their homeland. And I think we can all agree it's very possible the sea peoples could have their own playable faction in the future as well. That gives the player the chance to be a direct reason for the end of civilization. But my god, that's all they are. Token factions adding a bit of replayability to players really craving it, and to me anyway, that represents what could have been if CA Sophia were just given the dev resources to make a proper Bronze Age Total War game. Who knows, maybe a DLC roadmap is revealed in a couple of months and it shows CA after the Hyenas cancellation now have the budget and resources to expand the map, but I really truly doubt it, and I think if anything all of this shows there's some really tough times ahead and Pharaoh is already suffering from being gutted for it, and of course as players we're all suffering from these circumstances as well. As I said, if you've enjoyed early access, good for you. I'm not telling you not to like the game or not to buy the game. You can do what you want, and no YouTuber should ever tell you what to do or what not to do. But all of this is really bad news and doesn't give me much hope in the future of the game. That's the point I'm ultimately trying to make here. Overall, not only is Pharaoh mostly built on Troy, not only do the data files show the campaign map will probably, very likely never get expanded into areas that would make this the definitive Bronze Age game, but they're also trying to see if they can pass on that responsibility to fix and expand everything onto modders who do all of their brilliant work that is arguably in many areas better than CA for free. It's shameful business behavior, and all of this again indicates CA is going through some very desperate times, leading to decisions that are totally unethical and very exploitative of the community and its modders. In the last video I made about Pharaoh, I asked if I was being too harsh. Well, with all of this in mind, I don't think I was being harsh enough. Not only are we getting half a Bronze Age game a lot of people didn't ask for, but the likelihood of any sort of map expansion is almost non-existent. The likelihood of reusing things from Troy is even greater now, and personally, I think this is absolutely not the full major historical Total War we've been told it is. In my last video, I said I lost all hope for Pharaoh. Well, now I don't have any hope in its future either. And that's it for today, guys. This video has basically been about all the info I've been given from modders looking into the early access build of the game, and has been about my thoughts on the state of the future of Pharaoh. I care about Total War just as I'm sure all of you do. Historical Total War gives me some of the best memories I've had in my years of gaming, but the next definitive Bronze Age title so far doesn't live up to its name at all. I really hope you enjoyed this video or found it informative. If you did, give it a like and drop any thoughts or questions in the comment section below. What do you think of Total War Pharaoh so far, and what do you think about its future? Subscribe to the channel for more Total War videos just like this, and thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.